Hey, thanks for tuning in to the You Got the Ron Dude podcast. Full audio episodes are available on Anchor.fm and Spotify, so be sure to check back for when they drop on other platforms as well. Video clips are available on the YouTube channel. Check episode descriptions for those, and they'll also be available on Spotify. They'll be easy to spot as only full episodes will be numbered. I'd love to hear from you, so be sure to leave some feedback in the comments. If you're listening on Anchor.fm, you can even leave a voice message. If you'd like to sponsor an episode, those are the best ways to reach me.
It began with the forging of the great films. Threads were given by Tolkien, immortal, wisest and fairest of all beings. Rights were granted to Jackson, great miner and craftsman of the Mountain of Lore. And nine hours were gifted to the race of men, who above all else desire quality. But were all of them deceived? For another show was made. In the land of Amazon, in the fires of Mount Prime, the Dark Lord Bezos forged in secret a master flop. And into this show he poured his money, his greed, and his will to dominate all film. One show to ruin them all.
Welcome one, welcome all. Another episode of the You Got the Ron Dude podcast. Thanks for tuning in. This episode is all about the upcoming series, The Lord of the Rings of Power. All my concerns, worries, things I'm hyped about. Because I'm sure like many of you, at least once a year, you try and venture back to Middle-earth watching, the original trilogy or the Hobbit trilogy. And I'm probably going to watch those within the next couple weeks. Because just great films. And the Rings of Power series premieres just a couple days. So very excited to talk about it. Just going over a lot of stuff. And I'd love to hear from you. So leave a voice message on Anchor or leave some comments. And I put the clips out on all platforms. And full episodes on Spotify and Anchor. But let's get right into it. So Morfydd Clark as Galadriel and Robert Aramayo as Elrond. Perfect casting. You can identify those characters right away because they're playing younger versions of them. And they just look great, in the trailer. I'm curious if they're going to be like the focal point, at least of this season, the first one. Is it going to be more about them? Because you have, the dwarves, elves, the human characters, the rise of Sauron, a lot of different storylines. But in a series, at least, you can explore a lot more. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. But Galadriel and Elrond, they definitely stood out in the trailer. I was really impressed by that. Just perfect casting. And I'll be dealing with a lot of characters, a lot of different story arcs. But I'm curious, because I'll get into this more later, but it's not just going to be one season. Of course, it'll depend on, the feedback and such, but with this first one, are they going to focus on a couple of characters? Because I have a feeling it's going to be a very slow build. And they're just going to explore a lot of different options, maybe have some original ideas separate from the books. But let me know what you think. Let's talk about the rise of Sauron, or Sauron in general, in this series. Because there was a lot of controversy of their appearance in the trailer, kind of some mixed feedback. I found this article from Polygon.com, and they shed more light on, the fact that we're not even sure that's Sauron, and the fact that Sauron takes on different forms. So at the beginning of the article, they kind of set up the basic premise of the series, and amid it all, there's a man played by Anson Boone, that's a great name by the way, sowing seeds of fire, lurking in a gray cloak and generally looking like he's up to no good. The internet rushed to fill in the blank. This is our first glimpse of Sauron, the big bad who's gathering power during the Second Age. But the truth is, that's not yet true. Saying that the trailer is setting up this person to be someone, though there's no confirmation yet on who exactly Boone is playing. Put differently, it's very likely the trailer was trying to set us up to think of Boone's character as Sauron. But even if he is Sauron, he's definitely not the flaming eyeball that Lord of the Rings fans are familiar with from Peter Jackson's film trilogy. The problem with finding Sauron in any trailer for The Rings of Power is that back in the Second Age, he went by the name Anatar and could shapeshift liberally, a power he used to hide his evil nature for as long as possible. See, that's what I'm talking about. So, they show you a glimpse of this character, and because they look like they're up to no good, we're like, oh, that's probably Sauron in, one of his forms. So let's continue. He's described in the books as the Lord of Gifts, and as having a fair appearance, they say, meaning pale but also pretty, which Boone's character, whoever it may be, certainly does. And with that fair face, Sauron manipulated the elven smith Celebrimbor into teaching him how to make a ring that could manipulate the minds of those who held Celebrimbor's rings of power, which, as we know, led to a whole thing. Now, I'm familiar with that name. I've never said it out loud, that Celebrimbor. But yes, that's the person who forged the rings. And I'll get more into that later, because I'm hoping that's at least a full episode. Because forging the rings, the creation, and then them being divided amongst the elves, dwarves, and humans, and of course Sauron. Let's continue. The creative team behind the Rings of Power has said that in this series we'll be seeing Sauron in multiple forms as he tries to assume total power over Middle-earth. So I'm glad I read this article because it's more insight, because the trailer doesn't even tell us, nobody says, oh, Sauron. So him taking on different forms is very clever. Let's continue. So while Boone might be Sauron in some sense, he could also be an underling, an emissary, or even some minor villain completely unattached to the great evil. That's interesting too. That's a good point. But I am curious, the creation, the forging of the rings, the division of them, will that take up a full episode? When will it take place? Is it going to be a montage? Because I wasn't impressed by the title of this series. And I'll get more into that later. But with Celebrimbor, is that going to be a full episode? Is it going to take a few episodes? Because you just want to feel some weight to the creation of the rings. And the Rings of Power. But this series is more about the characters So I'm kind of confused. But, because, you know, like the Lord of the Rings, the original trilogy, did a great job with the flashbacks. Because, again, you can feel the weight of those scenes and their impact on the story. Because they don't take anything away, because the rings, that's what it's all about. The rings and the characters. But what do you think? Do you think it'll take up an episode? How far into the series will the rings be created? Is there going to be more to the story? Are they going to come up with new ideas? So one thing that stood out to me in the trailer, the most recent one, why are they breaking the fourth wall? I believe it was 3 times throughout the trailer. They're looking into the camera. I don't understand that. Because typically you're looking at a character, you know, you look like the left or the right of the camera. You don't look directly into it. I was very thrown off by that. And especially with the dwarf, he's up against the door and turns and just stares into the camera. It's like, was that supposed to be in the trailer? Was that for us? That seemed more like something for a costume test. Okay, let's dive into the cinematography of the trailer. There were a lot of great looking shots. Not everything blended well together though. It kind of looked like 2 different series. Some of them very epic, beautiful shots. Took you back to like Peter Jackson's movies, or his films rather. And while some other ones, it's like they weren't finished or the lighting was off. It's just they weren't set up very well. But overall I have faith because, you know, the first season, 8 episodes, and we saw like a 2.5 minute trailer, so we didn't see a whole lot. But it was an okay blend. Again, there were some shots that brought you back to the Middle Earth that we know from the old films. I say old now because, I mean, Fellowship is, you know, 21 years old. But some other ones you're kind of like, that shot, it doesn't match up with the other ones. And I don't mean as simple as like night and day. I just mean overall, just the quality and just the setup of some shots. But overall, I'm still looking forward to it. I'm sure each episode will have its, you know, unique look, just a better blend of the shots and that. Okay, was that Gandalf in the trailer? In that forest scene where he's being surrounded? I think yes. I think people would love to see Gandalf in this series. I'm curious. The writers, did they change anything about him? Is he going to have his own storyline? Is it going to be like the Eagles? He just shows up when it's necessary. And the voice, is going to be similar to Ian McKellen's? But definitely exciting if he's in it. I mean, he's around for sure. And if we'll see him talking with Galadriel and Elrond. But a lot of potential for this. But what do you think? Would it take away from anything? Or do you just want a cameo? Maybe just his own episode? But no matter what, it almost seems like a necessary addition to this series. Will Tom Bombadil appear in the Rings of Power series? Those of you familiar with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the movie trilogy, Peter Jackson had said that, you know, they wanted to use him, but it just didn't help move the story along. And, you know, when that film came out, the first one, Fellowship, you know, DVDs were on the rise, and I wish that they'd shot like a full scene with Tom in whatever context, you know, like if he was part of Merry and Pippin joining Frodo and Sam, or rescuing all of them. They shot it and then just put it on the DVD extras. And of course, I wasn't in the Hobbit films. But I think this is a good opportunity, not only for fan service, but to insert this character into the movie franchise, into the series now, of course, with the Rings of Power. It seems long overdue. And I'm going to read about him in the Lord of the Rings fandom. While his role and nature in the first and second ages is unknown, he must have witnessed most of the major events and battles. And see, that's what I'm talking about. That's a great opportunity. But do we want to see him, you know, in the distance, just walking along and he witnesses battle? Or do you want to actually use him in the series somehow? And it could be tricky because it's like you don't want to upset fans if you know, you put him in a scene with characters and it's like, well, this didn't happen in the books, in the stories. Something original, something new. It could be exciting, but also like in what context. But let's continue. He also witnessed the reducing of the great forests that covered all Middle-earth and perhaps of his powers. The level of his interactions with the outside world is also unclear. See, another opportunity. Let's continue. However, he perhaps became a folkloric figure in the traditions and legends of elves, dwarves, and men. As a result, he came to be known by many names during his pilgrimage. The elves called as Iarwain Benadar, which means oldest and fatherless in Sindarin, while he was known as Orald to men and Forn to the dwarves. So again, more opportunities to insert his character, even if he's just having conversations with elves, dwarves, men. Let's continue. At the end of his wanderings, Tom focused his exploration only on Eriador, making him the first to reside in the west, even before the elves moved there and the tides were folded. In this period, his journey down the Withywindle to the Brandywine River, several of the valley's mysterious residents, including the river spirit Goldberry, the tree spirit Old Man Willow, and the badger folk, attempted to capture Bombadil for their own ends, but quail at the power of Tom's voice. Ultimately, Bombadil was captured and married Goldberry when she pulled Tom by his beard under the water lilies out of mischief. But he ordered her to let him free. The next day he came to the river woman and asked Goldberry to be his wife, and the creatures of the old forest attended their wedding. And this quote by Elrond from the Fellowship of the Ring. But I had forgotten Bombadil, if indeed this is still the same that walked the woods and hills long ago, and even then was older than the old. That was not then his name. Iarwain Benadar, we called him, oldest and fatherless. But many another name he has since been given by other folk, and like I mentioned before, Forn by the dwarves, Orald by northern men, and other names beside. He is a strange creature. Let's continue. It is not known when Tom settled into his domain outside the old forest, but of course he was already living there when the Third Age began. He also saw the arrival of hobbits in the region that would become the Shire, which led him occasionally to interact with the little folk, mostly in Buckland. He eventually was named Tom Bombadil by the Bucklanders. At some point he also ventured into Bree and met Barlaam Butterbur, the proprietor of the Prancing Pony. And that's it from that site. So I just wanted to give you some more context and such. And as you can tell, it seems like there's a lot of opportunities to use the character in this series. Whether it's once a cameo, a couple cameos, him just passing by, passing through, having conversations. If there's a full episode dedicated to him, maybe if he's doing some voiceover or something. But if anything, one of my theories is that they'll incorporate Tom Bombadil, at least at the end of the series. If we even get to season 5, it all depends on how these seasons are received. Even if we get a second season. But I know there's a huge gap between the events of The Rings of Power and The Hobbit, talking thousands of years. But something just to kind of tie those together, kind of connect them. But not like a lead right into The Hobbit, because that's just a huge gap. But let me know what you think. Cameos, voiceover, an episode dedicated to him. Or is it kind of like the Lord of the Rings, the trilogy, where you're like, there's just no room for him? And I understand the timeline issues as well, but it just seems like, I have a feeling he'll be incorporated somehow. Or get his own series. That's a possibility. A very limited series, even. So it was reported the 5-season commitment, and that's a bold move because the first season premieres in a couple days, and some people have already seen the first 2 episodes, and they've put out their opinions, their reviews online. And I'm just worried because if season 1 is underwhelming, if it's poorly reviewed, then what's going to happen? Because I'd read they're not going to start shooting season 2 until October. But, $1 billion into this, that's a lot of money, but as you know, money doesn't equal success. It doesn't equal greatness. You can pour hundreds of millions of dollars into a movie and it's underwhelming. And people are just like, I didn't get it, or it was disappointing. And this series, it's just going to be a slow burn. The trailers, didn't feature a lot of action. There were a few great looking shots, action sequences, but there wasn't anything really captivating and such. And I wonder if each season will focus on one major event. Because like the Rings of Power, they're not going to call all 5 seasons that, are they? Like season 1 is about the Rings of Power, the forging of the rings, the creation, dividing them up. But season 2, I feel like that should have its own title. Like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, if they just called each one like Lord of the Rings Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, you'd be like, oh, that's kind of boring. But let me know what you think. And 5 seasons, I imagine they have, the stories outlined and such. But I wonder, is each season going to end with a cliffhanger? Because if this is all about the creation of the rings, 5 seasons, even if each season is 8 episodes, I mean, you can tell a lot of different stories in that, but I worry they're going to branch out too much. And you'll be like, wait, this episode doesn't lead into anything. It's just its own story. Are they all connected? I'll admit I'm not in love with the title. And again, I hope each season has its own title. You know, Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. Next season, Lord of the Rings, The Fall of something. You know, some kingdom. And the trailer, the music didn't really fit too well with it. In a little bit, I'll be talking about Bear McCreary's score. And I'm surprised they didn't use that in the trailer. But it didn't ruin it, of course. But the trailer, again, I talked about earlier, some of the shots, they just didn't blend well together. And despite all the seemingly build-up, it's like it didn't really even focus on the rings at all. And of course, it's, you know, all about the characters and the rings and their journeys and rise and fall of kingdoms and characters and such. But the rings weren't even the focus, which is interesting. And the trailer didn't blow me away. Like, if I had never seen the Lord of the Rings movies or the Hobbit films, I probably would have been like, I'm going to skip this, because it just didn't draw you in, really. And should have been a longer trailer, because 8 episodes for the first season, we should have gotten more insight into what the story's about. If it's one storyline, all connected, and then you end with a cliffhanger into season 2, or if each episode focuses on something different. I am interested to see Isildur, of course. We saw, you know, flashbacks in the Lord of the Rings movies, and that was great, but this could be interesting. But I'm curious how much screen time this character will get, if he's going to be a child, a teenager, adult, you know, get his own episode or something. I always love that line from Aragorn. It wasn't like a quote or anything, he just says, I'm Isildur's heir. I love that. And of course, we gotta give a big shout out to Peter Jackson for his trilogies, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. There's been a lot of controversy. Did they ghost him? They said they were going to send him scripts. Did they have no faith in the scripts? Legal issues? Or did the Tolkien estate step in? Was it their decision to have him not involved? But it would be interesting to see his take, his ideas. Because 5 seasons, you can cover a lot of stuff, but it's like, you could just keep going. So I'm curious if he'll be involved with future spin-offs, TV or movies, films. But I'm curious. It sounds like everything's okay. Like he's very understanding in that. And it'd be nice to know the reason. If someone said, I don't want him involved, or they just didn't want his opinion on anything. Even if he just like went over the scripts and gave them notes, but maybe they didn't want notes. But I look at a series like Game of Thrones, 8 seasons, and they have a prequel that's out now. So we'll see with this series. If it's really successful, they could just keep going. So they'll be like, well, 5 seasons, that was just the start. So if the first season gets mixed reviews or pretty terrible reviews, or let's say it does okay, that it gets a second season order, what cameos would you like to see? Something that could help save the series. Like it was great to see Legolas in Desolation of Smaug and Battle of the Five Armies, even though he wasn't in The Hobbit. But something like that, what ideas do you have? Who would you like to see? One score to unite them. So Howard Shore provides the main theme, the title theme for the show. And then shout out to Bear McCreary, who scored the remainder of the series. Said 9 hours of music created for the first season. A full album was released with the main title theme and selections from Bear's score. And I was listening to those this morning and just blown away. They were very beautiful, very well done. It takes you back to Middle Earth, that feeling when you watch the trilogies, the films, but they're also very original. So it's the same style, but their own thing. It said additional soundtracks will be released after episodes air. So just keep in mind, you're just getting like selections from each score piece. But very beautiful. I haven't listened to all of it yet. There's like 2.5 hours of music. But just blown away by it. Well, the first 2 episodes of The Rings of Power, Season 1, drop on September 2nd on Prime Video. So I'm very excited, and 2 episodes is great. I'm not even sure the runtime of them. I imagine at least 40 minutes each, because, again, with 8 episodes, I mean, you probably have like several hours of content, which is great. And I don't mind that it's going to be a slow build, a lot of conversations. But I am curious, the pacing, is it going to be an issue? And at least with new characters, you have time to explore their origins, how they fit into the story. I know they've introduced some new characters that, weren't in the books at all. But that could work. We'll see. But let me know what you think. Leave a voice message on anchor.fm. Leave some comments on YouTube. Rate and review the show. I appreciate it. Well, I was going to end there, but a little bonus segment. I'm going to talk about my journey with The Lord of the Rings, how it all started. So way back 2001, my friends, they were deciding if we were going to see the first Harry Potter movie or the first Lord of the Rings. I had no idea, any of the content, the books, never read them in school or anything. And they decided upon Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, just because at the time, we were in college, and the Harry Potter movies, it just looked like it was for kids. Not bashing them. I still haven't seen all the movies, the Harry Potters, but I'm going to get to those. But it just seemed, with Lord of the Rings, it was more fitting. And I had no idea what I was walking into. And I was blown away by the special effects, by the story. I had no idea. I thought at the end, I'm like, they're going to make another one, right? And then you learn more about the books. Keep in mind, this is 2001. So very early internet. No real social media. I think Friendster was around, but even that wasn't really popping. This is before MySpace, kids. MySpace. So after the first movie, they announced the next year would be The Two Towers, and then in 2003, Return of the King. And this is before I got involved, or before I fell in love with filmmaking. And DVDs, I remember when I started working at Fred Meyer the following year in 2002, I got my first DVD player. So it was great with the extended editions and all the bonus material. I just eat that stuff up. I love it. And of course, with the Hobbit films, when those came out, I was like, oh, I know there's going to be extended editions. So I was very excited about those as well. And I have all those on Blu-ray and even more, bonus material and such. But yeah, The Fellowship, I just adored the movie. And because at the time, like I mentioned, I was in college. Because I remember in the library, I would read the book The Hobbit. Because I know I went out to some bookstore, got all the books, just devoured those. And I remember reading The Hobbit, because you think like, well, this could definitely be a movie. And in the bonus material, I believe I think it was maybe the first Hobbit movie, they talked about they were location scouting after Return of the King for King Kong, which is very underrated, Peter Jackson's King Kong. And they ran into Martin Freeman, and they just said to themselves, like, if we ever made a Hobbit movie, he could play Bilbo. And then you fast forward. But, yeah, then of course, The Two Towers. And again, this is 2002, so no social media. The only way you could spoil the movies for yourself is if you read the books. And I'm not even sure if IMDb was around. They used to have message boards, but people just spoiled movies so much they got rid of them over the years. But it was those the wraiths, whatever they're called, in the theater. Oh, my ears! I had to cover my ears when I heard those. It's the only thing I didn't like about Two Towers and Return of the King. I didn't even mind the big spider, Shelob. I'm just no more of that. Whoosh. I was like, I had the same reaction as Frodo and Sam. I'm like, make it stop. That was brutal in theaters. But my ears were young. And now I could probably tolerate it. But oh, just that shriek sound. Ooh. But yeah, that trilogy, Lord of the Rings, those got me more interested in like behind the scenes stuff, deleted scenes, extended. Because when you saw the trailer for Return of the King, they show when I think it's the Witch King lands on the ground in front of Gandalf. He's on the horse with Pippin. Wait, am I getting that right? Merry? No, Mary's on the horse. Good gosh. See, I gotta watch these again. But anyways, that shot, I was like, oh my gosh. And then you went to see the movie, and it wasn't in the theatrical cut. So I was very, very eager to watch the extended edition. And what they did with Sauron as well, I would have kept that in the theatrical cut. I thought that was important because it's like, well, what happened to him? But great trilogy, Return of the King, the extended edition. I always said that's my favorite film because I do love, long movies, like a 4-hour runtime. It's like, yeah, but they give all those characters send-offs. And some people didn't like that because they're like, just wrap it up. And it's like, no, we got to say goodbye some of these characters forever. So it didn't bother me at all. Because some movies, you can argue, they wrap up too quickly. Because they're like, all this mess around here, and we got all these legal matters to go over. But I still remember 2009 on YouTube, still early YouTube, watching this kind of mini behind-the-scenes video with Peter Jackson. And he said they were having trouble getting the Hobbit movie made. But he was sitting on a set. It was Gollum's Cave, I believe. And he was just talking about financing and such. And it was so hard to watch because it's so depressing. Despite all the success of the original trilogy, it's like here he is, and that movie didn't come out, the first one, An Unexpected Journey, until 2012. But just getting it made. And I was thrilled because when he announced An Unexpected Journey and then a second movie called There and Back Again. But I was thrilled when he announced the third chapter, because when you watch The Desolation of Smaug and Battle of the Five Armies, so they went away with the There and Back Again title. Desolation and Battle. Imagine that as one movie, because Battle of the Five Armies is truly a war film. I love the action. And it's funny because I was telling my dad that The Desolation of Smaug, that's probably the best of that trilogy. But Battle of the Five Armies I've watched more just because I love all the action. And the love story worked for me. I think if they introduced it in the first movie, it would have had a better chance of that being convincing. But, it's heartbreaking. I mean, Battle of the Five Armies, in the end, it's very depressing. A lot of characters die. A love story that ends tragically. But the extended edition I was a little disappointed by, because you're kind of spoiled by the other movies because they're 3 hours plus, and with Battle they added like 20 minutes, which is a lot of footage. But I almost wanted an extended outro, extended finale, but that one didn't seem to do very well. But again, back to that video from 2009. I was like, I'm not sure if these, movies are going to be made. But it was great when, everything got the green light. And I do remember with the first Hobbit movie, they'd shot it in a higher frame rate. So it's interesting because you watch TV and movies and you can identify right away, like that's a movie, that's a TV show. Because it has to do with the cameras, the lenses, the frame rate. So the first Hobbit movie, if you watched that one with the higher frame rate, it looked like a soap opera. Everything is like so smooth, but it just doesn't work. It almost takes you out of the movie. But over the years, like I said, I always enjoyed the behind the scenes, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the documentaries, because you learn about the story. And I talked about in this episode Tom Bombadil, because they say, well, we wanted to shoot something with him, but it didn't help move the story along. And just stuff like that, learning about Tolkien, of course, and them talking about, being on set, and every day you had rewrites. And because you have so much material to draw from. And then you have to figure out pacing and such. Because with Lord of the Rings, even the theatrical editions, each movie was 3 hours and some change. But then with the extended editions, you get to see even more, which is great. But the Lord of the Rings trilogy will stand the test of time, for sure. I mean, you even look at the effects, because this is early 2000s, and the effects, you're like, they shouldn't look this good. Some movies that come out today or recently, special effects, you're like, it looks too animated. What's going on here? I don't like this at all. You can tell, because the characters are just so flimsy in that, and you're like, they don't move like that, though. And I also, one thing that drew me into filmmaking is when they were doing the behind the scenes featurettes and that, and they incorporated matte paintings, miniatures, and then filled in whatever else with CGI. I love that blend. Because not only does that give more jobs to more people, but it's just the artistry of it. It just draws you in. It's so beautiful. And that's stuff that I also just eat up. Like, if I ever make, films that require that kind of stuff, I'd love to incorporate it because you can also like make videos and be like, can you guys tell like which is a miniature, what's CG, and what's a matte painting? And just a great blend of it. And the Hobbit trilogy I adore as well. I enjoyed those films very much. And again, it's just a very depressing ending. But I thought the pacing was great, and Bilbo meeting Smaug, like that's such a great scene. Just their conversation in that. And I don't know if those movies, if that trilogy had come out a couple years after Lord of the Rings, maybe they would have done better, I'm not sure. But, I mean, the music is great, and one thing, it's funny, because Battle of the Five Armies, when the dwarves finally come out of their home to help in the final battle, I would have used that theme from the first movie. That dun 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 dun. I thought that would have been perfect. I mean, the music they used is still fine, but I thought they'd use that theme. But the effects look great, and there are just so many great characters. Legolas, of course, it's great to see him, even though he wasn't in the Hobbit book. Tauriel, a great addition. Such a strong character, and just heartbreaking ending. You know, that love story. But I liked their theme, that music, that was really well done. And of course, the opening of Battle of the Five Armies, taking down Smaug. That whole scene, I think it's like 10 minutes. It's just, that's such a strong introduction. And that's just one of maybe my favorite scene in the entire trilogy, if I had to pick one out. And Benedict Cumberbatch is the voice of Smaug. And, you know, everything with Bard, it was just beautifully done. But again, if you had those two movies, Desolation and Battle, as one, I don't mind if it's like, you know, a 4-hour plus movie, but packing all that into one, I totally understand why they divided up the movies in that. And you just spend so much time with the characters, and they don't try and branch off and do too much. Because it wouldn't have worked if they'd introduced Tauriel in the third one, because then you just don't have time for a love story, really. So in the second one, because they didn't introduce too many new characters or anything. And yeah, just some of the best, most breathtaking battle sequences I've seen in Battle of the Five Armies, and especially in the extended cut. Because when you watch a theatrical, you're like, wait, now they're going up there, wait. But the extended version, you see more. And I don't think I saw any of those in theaters. I know Lord of the Rings, yeah, the first one, Fellowship, I saw with my friends. And then Two Towers we saw. And I remember seeing Return of the King with my dad and my sister, I believe. And yeah, the Hobbit movies, though, I don't think I saw any of those in theaters. I'm trying to remember. Even the first one now is about 10 years old. But I like that those came out 2012, 13, and 14. But, yeah, I always enjoyed the books and the different editions and such. But let me know your story. I hope you enjoyed this. Just a little insight. I was going to make this a separate episode, but I usually type out all my notes, sometimes even like script, you know, some portions. But this one I'm just going off of memory because I've talked about this before. But yeah, I just adore it, and I really hope this new series, I hope that I like it, and I hope that fans like it. And because people not familiar with the Middle Earth verse, try saying that 5 times fast. People not familiar would probably be like, this is boring. It's kind of like when you watch the Godfather for the first time. Let's say you fall in love with it and you try and get a friend to watch it, and they're like, it's just people sitting around talking. This is boring. It's like, no, you gotta watch till the end. I'm telling you. But with this series, I kind of got mixed feelings about its fate. I think I'll like it. I don't know if I'm gonna love it, but hopefully it'd be great if like Peter Jackson ended up reviewing each episode, just doing like a video podcast or something, or reacting to the trailer, maybe select scenes. That would be great. But leave a voice message on anchor.fm if you want. Leave some comments. I'd love to hear from you. Share your journey, your unexpected journey with Lord of the Rings and Hobbit films. But thank you very much for listening, and that'll do it for this episode. Well, the outro is coming up next, but but that is going to do it for this episode. So be sure to check out the links in the episode descriptions. And shout out to canva.com, which is what I use to create all the artwork, and anchor.fm, who not only distributes the podcast to other platforms, but also has fantastic editing options for content. I appreciate your time. Hope you had a great stay, and I will see you next episode.